A while back, I made a video right here on this YouTube channel talking about how to build up or improve your credit score if you were having trouble with that in the past. Now, this video didn't do as well as some of my other videos covering the topics I typically cover, but I understood that going into the making of that video. I just wanted to put this out there because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about building up your credit and just financial advice in general on YouTube as a platform and across the internet. And in reality, building and maintaining your credit score is incredibly simple. One of the websites that I reference that's free, that's not a sponsor, is Credit Karma, because Credit Karma, if you just read what's on their website, actually lays out how to build up your credit score. And I think this is important that people will know because there's a lot of bad advice out there, and I just wanted to correct some of that. Now, despite the lower view count on that video, the reception from people who did actually watch it, the people that I love, by the way, those of you who didn't watch it, you kind of broke my heart, but for those of you who did, the people that I love again, your reception was overwhelmingly positive, and I really appreciated that. I got a lot of comments from parents not realizing that using the authorized user could actually backdate a credit history for their kids, and they were incredibly happy to learn of this information, and I was grateful to give it to you. So even though it didn't get the most amount of views, it got positive reception, and at least some people out there learned the basics of credit and know where to look for in order to learn a little bit more about it. So I was happy with it. However, there were other comments on this video, and I'm not talking about the normal negative comments that make no sense because people spurg out on the internet that come with every other video that I make. I'm talking about the comments that mentioned a one Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, you should look at Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey says credit cards are bad. You don't buy credit cards because Dave Ramsey. Now, based on the fact that so many people in the comments of that video mentioned Dave Ramsey, I felt like I had to look into him. And the reason I looked into him is because generally I have really bad reservations about people who offer financial advice on the internet. Number one, among those bad reservations, is that people who typically tell you how to become a millionaire or how to make money in an industry, the inside secrets or the inside tracks, are actually people who never made money in whatever industry that they're talking about and actually make their money selling you the idea of you being able to make money through whatever weird hokey method that they're selling. So just based on that, my reservations about people that are referenced the way that this guy was referenced in the comments, I decided to look into Dave Ramsey. And even going into it with my skeptical eye, I have to say, for the most part, I'm happy to report that this is not one of those situations. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Dave Ramsey was one of these young millionaires back in the 1980s. He made a bunch of his money in his mid-20s flipping houses when the real estate market was really beneficial for wealthy people in order for them to avoid taxes. There were better tax incentives if you put your money in real estate than other types of investments. So this was when Dave Ramsey was coming up. Now, during this time, Dave Ramsey was doing 90-day loans on houses, and these were common among people who intended to flip the houses really quickly, even though just by the number 90 days, when you compare it to the standard 30-year fixed rate mortgage, you can understand that these loans were risky if tax incentives were ever to change in the real estate market, making it not such a good investment for wealthy people compared to other alternatives when it comes to taxation. Surprise, surprise, during the 1980s, this little loophole for wealthy people ended up being repealed. It wasn't really repealed, but the tax incentives were kind of normalized to other types of investments, and that caused all of the capital that was funneling into the real estate market at that time to basically dry up and in reality just normalize. Now, Dave Ramsey, being over leveraged with a bunch of these 90-day mortgages on all of these properties that he intended to flip in a collapsing market, obviously was in a horrible financial position, and thus he ended up having to file for bankruptcy. Now, there's a lot of details in that story that I'm leaving out, but those are the basics of it. That's really all you need to know. And this is when Dave Ramsey found himself at his low point. Now, during the course of his low point, Dave Ramsey took a lot of lessons from what he was doing back in the real estate market and kind of rebuilt his life, rebuilt his brand. And now he teaches people to not only get out of debt, but the end goal of the Dave Ramsey program is to get yourself to the point where your net worth is above $1 million. He's selling the idea that he can make you a millionaire through his strategies of debt reduction, living beneath your means and saving a whole bunch, and paying for a lot of depreciating assets that people normally take out loans for in cash. And all in all, I have nothing against this program. I have nothing against the idea that people should live beneath their means in order for, in the future, for their greater overall means to expand. 100% get that. In fact, I think Dave Ramsey is at his strongest when he's lecturing people about auto loans, because cars are some of the worst investments you can possibly make, and you paying an interest rate, paying more for the price of money to borrow on a car note when a car is a depreciating asset is always a bad financial decision. So I actually 100% agree with Dave Ramsey when it comes to paying cash for things like cars. Save up, buy something used, 3 to 5 years old, once all of the major value has already been depreciated from the vehicle, and then drive the car that you can afford. And if you become wealthier in the future and you can afford a fancy new car, know that it's a bad investment, but be able to pay for that out of pocket. So even though you're losing the money, you're not paying interest on a depreciating asset. Now, he also has a program called the baby steps, which will make mathematicians angry once we get into one of the steps when it comes to paying off your debt. But I actually understand the reasoning behind why he proposes paying off your debts this way, and it's for psychological benefits because he's trying to get you in a different mindset in order to pay off your debts. And what I'm talking about with the mathematicians versus his program is that Dave Ramsey recommends that you pay off your debt from smallest to biggest, regardless of interest rate. Now, any mathematician will tell you, and I'll tell you if you're asking me and you're definitely committed to this and you don't require the psychological gratification of paying off your debts in this way, that you should definitely pay off your debts from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, because you're going to end up spending more money overall if the interest rates don't align with what Dave Ramsey is proposing by paying it off this way. However, I 100% understand his logic behind it, and by the way, this is called the snowball method versus the avalanche method, because this has psychological benefits, and if you're trying to pay off the highest interest rate debt, and that takes you a while, eventually you could get into a self-defeatist attitude and not end up going for it. Now, by the way, my personal recommendation for paying off debt is neither of these methods. I want you, especially if it's credit card debt, to clear some of your best credit cards, the ones that have the best perks, and the chances are you might relapse and use your credit card during the course of you trying to pay off this debt. So if you pay off 1 or 2 of your best cards first, and you end up getting some perks for your purchases, even though you did mess up, even though you did relapse on this idea that you're getting rid of this debt, it's not the worst case scenario as if you were paying off a card that offers you no benefits. Then after that, I think you should pay off the card that has the highest interest rate after you knock out 1 or 2. And then you should check your credit score this entire time and look for a card that offers you a good balance transfer deal and end up transferring whatever remaining balance. Now, the reason I recommend this method is because I did it myself, and if you get, 30% of the way to paying off your debt, 40% of the way, 50% of the way of paying off your debt, then you could pay off the latter half of your debt interest-free if you can get yourself a good balance transfer card. Now, Ramsey would never recommend you do that because you're opening up a new credit card, and he is staunchly against credit cards, but I just think that this is the best way. It has the best financial benefits. It's complicated, so probably that's not the best part about it. But in the end, you feel like that you've sprinted an extra mile when you have a year or 15 months, whatever the transfer card gives you, in order to pay off the latter half of your debt. Now, honestly, the particulars of whether you should pay off your credit card debt using a mathematical interest rate-based method or the snowball method, which has psychological perks, which is why Dave Ramsey pushes it, is neither here nor there, because what I was looking into for you guys who are leaving me comments related to Dave Ramsey is whether or not this is a program that you can trust isn't out to scam money out of you and will actually help you with financial discipline and getting yourself out of debt. And if you follow the tenets of Dave Ramsey's program, you will likely get out of debt as long as you're not breaking from these tenets. Now, there are some issues I have with it, which I will save for later, but overall, I understand the purpose behind this program. It's essentially rehab for people who act like drug addicts with money. Totally get it. And if you're in this program, I'm not going to make fun of you, and I'm not going to tell you, like other programs that people end up selling on how to make yourself a millionaire or whatever, that this is clearly a scam. Because from what I can see, That's not the scam. Dave Ramsey does make money off of selling this program, but this program is not promising you a dream based on you constantly feeding him money. It's just steps that you follow to get yourself out of debt, and all of the steps make really good sense. However, with that being said, there is one point where I do definitely diverge from Dave Ramsey and what he says, and that's when it comes to credit cards. Now, first and foremost, Dave Ramsey overall is right about credit cards. A huge portion of the American population are completely irresponsible with credit cards. If you look at the interest rates of credit cards, they're incredibly high, so being irresponsible with them will have a significant cost. However, every time somebody calls into the Ramsey show and talks about being disciplined with credit cards in order to get cash back or airline points or some such thing, he always responds with the biggest non sequitur ever, and I'm just going to play it for you so you can understand what I mean.
The reason is really simple. I've met with thousands of millionaires, and I have never met a single millionaire that says, by the fact that I'm ripping off the credit card company with 1 month's worth of interest on the amount of my purchases, and I got Discover points back or airline miles back, that's what made me wealthy. I've never heard that ever. Because it has never occurred.
He never hears millionaires talking about cash back or credit card points, or he's never heard of somebody becoming a millionaire through cashback or credit card points, which is something that he says consistently whenever he gets these kind of calls, even though that's a complete non-point and in no way related with what the caller is bringing up. Nobody's talking about becoming a millionaire with airline points or becoming a millionaire with cash back. What people are talking about is that if you spend the exact same way on a debit card or through cash on a credit card and you're getting 1 or 2% cash back, are you not better off for using that? And he doesn't want you to fall into the trappings of the credit card, so he tells you no, when in reality the answer is undoubtedly yes. Also, credit cards have better security options than debit cards. There's a whole bunch of other reasons why doing this method is beneficial. But I want to go to this point that he talks about where credit cards scam you, and he basically says you will never beat the credit card game, because it's true, but not exactly for the reason that he's telling you.
You actually think you're going to take on a multi-billion-dollar company who studies your behavior more than you study your behavior and come out on the right end of this stick. Did you know the credit card is the most aggressively marketed product in the history of humankind? Nothing has been sold to anyone in any culture in any kind of a volume close to the credit card, and then you're so stupid that you think you're going to get away with using it for free. If you do, it's going to be a short-term thing.
Now, while it is true that there are sophisticated multinational corporations behind your credit cards that have great marketing research in order to get you to spend more and carry a balance and pay them interest payments, even if you don't fall for that, you will not be beating the credit card game. And the reason for that is because even if you pay off your balance completely at the end of every month, do what every financial advisor tells you to do, the credit cards will still make a profit even if you max out your rewards that you're getting from them. And the reason for this is because your merchant actually pays a percentage of whatever thing that he's selling you every time you use your card, and whatever amount of rewards you get from your credit card are covered by that fee that the card company charges to the merchant for them to have the ability to accept that form of payment. This is the real reason why you'll never beat the credit card companies, because all of their rewards are proportional to what fees that company charges the merchants that accept their card. American Express is probably the company best known for the perks that it offers its card members, and that's because American Express is also known to merchants as the company that charges them the biggest fees for taking American Express at their stores. Now look, if using credit cards in the way that I'm describing to you is not something that's appealing to you, I completely understand. Again, the perks are not that great in proportion to what you're spending, so you might be better off, especially if you have low discipline with credit cards, in not pursuing those perks in the first place. But for me, there is no logic whatsoever in me using my debit card for any transaction when I get nothing for doing so, when I have credit cards that I will always get something for doing so. And again, I do pay off my cards at the end of every month, every single time, so I'm one of those cases where I'm actually able to do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, if you don't trust yourself to do that, then I definitely recommend you going down the Dave Ramsey path. However, the point I'm trying to make here is that it's just not accurate that if you can do that, if you do have the discipline, that it's not better for you to do that. Plus, again, it is easier to reverse a transaction on a credit card than it is a debit card because they have better security features, because credit card fraud is something that these companies are very weary of, and that alone, for me, who's running a business for myself, is enough for me to do my purchases, especially when I'm buying equipment, through something that has a little bit more security, even though I am perfectly capable of paying off whatever purchase that I have at the end of the month when the balance comes due. Also, making sure you pay off this thing at the end of the month when the balance comes due definitely hurts you because you're chucking a lot of money that used to be little transactions at one giant transaction. So to Dave Ramsey's point that it should hurt you to spend money, for me, when I do this, it definitely does. And the final thing that I'm going to leave you with on where I break with Ramsey is credit cards in terms of an emergency option. Now, I know Ramsey tells you that you should save up some level of an emergency fund, but sometimes you don't have an emergency fund and something comes up and you need to be able to pay for it in an instance, and you don't mind paying the higher rates of interest. Because again, an interest rate is not just the price of money, but an interest rate is also what you're paying to somebody for fronting you this money that it would take you a long time for you to save. So in reality, interest is also paying for time, not just the price of money. And in an emergency situation, like something having to do with your family, like something that I found myself in when I was much younger, when you don't have a credit card for emergencies can lead to tragic results. I had a relative that got sick. This person was definitely dying. Plane tickets to go see him overnight were ungodly expensive. So I decided that I was going to get in the car and drive to Florida rather than take the flight that I couldn't afford because I had no credit card. And while I was driving there, the relative that I was going to see ended up dying. Now, you tell me credit cards are 20% interest rate, 24% interest rate, 36% interest rate, 100% interest rate. I don't care. The fact is, the flight that I needed would have been around 2 hours long, and the drive ended up being 18 hours long, and I would pay any interest rate to have made it in time in order to see a member of my family before they passed away. So if you're somebody who's not interested in rewards, cash back, airline miles, any of that nonsense, I 100% understand. But you still should have something in case of an emergency. I call this the credit card in a glass box because there will be a time, or there's a good chance that there will be a time, where you need to have money fronted to you and you're not going to care about the cost of that money. And it's always good to have something on you for those circumstances, especially when your alternative options are something like payday loans, which have significantly higher interest rates than credit cards, and those loans are small and they're capped. So I always recommend at least having one card on you that you never use that has a high balance. Hopefully it's the one with your highest balance in case of emergency. So overall, I do think Dave Ramsey's program is a net good. I have some issues with it, but I understand why it's structured in the way that it's structured, and I understand why so many people felt the need to comment on my previous video that I should go check out and listen to Dave Ramsey, because if you are somebody that's helped out by this program, or somebody who's seen progress on debts that you've never been able to pay through this program, I get why you would be a big proponent of it. 95% of this program I can get on board with. There's just some points that I just break with him, and I understand that that's largely due to the fact that this program isn't really suited for somebody like me who doesn't have the issues that a typical Dave Ramsey person actually has. So would I do Ramsey's program myself? Probably not, although the basics of the financial advice I think are really solid. I know what points are not suited well for me. But would I recommend Ramsey's program to somebody who was in financial trouble? 95% chance I would, unless there's somebody that's like me and would pay off their debts and be better suited paying off their debts in the way that I did. I would definitely recommend it. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about Dave Ramsey based on the fact that you guys commented on him. Till next time.